And you are welcome along to the latest episode of the Huddle Breakdown. James here on hosting duties once again with my friend Alan Morrison from Celtic by Numbers. We're here to conduct an autopsy on the Celtic 1, Lazio 2 enjoyment that we all had yesterday in the second game of the Champions League group. So how you getting on, Alan? Did you enjoy that footballing viewing experience yesterday?
Well, as much as I could. I mean, I don't know. You probably got far superior coverage without paying a fortune over where you are. Over here, if you're not prepared to spend a fortune on BT Sport as it was, then you're scrabbing about for streams which were incredibly unreliable. In fact, missed most of the first half actually.
Oh my.
So just kind of started watching it back today. So
Yeah,
yeah, that
there's
was
a
that all added to the frustration level. To be fair.
for Champions League here. The main service is called Paramount Plus, and it's a streaming service. It's pretty reliable, but and I think I
Mm.
forget what I pay, maybe $8 a month for, but that's everything. Like it's the whole Paramount catalog of their movies and I think Serie A is on there and maybe the Bundesliga now too. I forget, but um, I can't keep track. They all hop around between ESPN Plus and Paramount Plus and this, that, and the other thing. Um, so yeah, we usually get one broadcaster that does the game, so we don't get like the UK BT or Sky um, broadcast teams. Unfortunately, I'd prefer those usually, but we just get some dude probably in some room somewhere in North America watching the game and doing it over the TV. But um, so yeah, 1-2 score line, and XG battle was actually ultimately we won the XG battle, Alan. I mean, for moral victories, we can put that up on the list of moral victories as we won an XG game.
Yeah, listen, this is a classic game where you're watching it as a fan. You've you've played well as your team. You watch your team play well. You look like you've scored a winning goal, then that gets taken away, and that's a blow. And then you can see the goal. 6 minutes into injury time, it's an absolute hammer blow. And so, in terms of how did the game make you feel, it makes you feel really bad. And you focus on the result, and you get reminded that although it's now more than 10 years by the time we play again at home, more than 10 years since we won a Champions League game at home, etc., etc., etc. So the result makes you feel terrible. The way it happened makes you feel terrible, and that's kind of then that frames that whole narrative of what you think about the game. But for me, in the cold light of day, looking at the performance, which is what we do, I think it's a very different narrative, really, frankly, for me. And this is a classic case of performance versus outcome. The outcome was shitty, and the way it happened was awful. But the performance actually was what we need to concentrate on, because and why, you know, because the performance is more indicative of what may happen in future than the result is. So, because it's likely to be broadly kind of repeatable, and then what are the patterns? What is Celtic's Champions League campaign showing us? It's only two games versus, for example, last season. What can we learn from that? So, for me, there was a huge amount to be encouraged by. Clearly, obviously, a huge amount to be that we can improve on, obviously. But you know, what I guess what I'm saying is I'm trying not to let the manner of the game and the outcome of the game cloud, a dispassionate assessment of what actually happened.
Yeah, that's easy to do, obviously, and that's partly why we have a podcast, is to try and trying to focus on some of these um, more objective uh, and I stress the term attempt, uh, more objective and analytically grounded um, perspective. And I agree. I mean, it was. demoralizing in so many ways because of all of the historical baggage. Um, but there's a lot, I think, of potential positives, but I think it reinforces a lot of the disappointments as well, which is, um, you know, that issue of the raw material, the talent levels in the team. And I think that was on glaring display once again yesterday, unfortunately. And part of what we talked about when we found out about the Champions League group was that this was about as ideal of a group as we could get, most likely. Part of that was because of Lazio not being that good this season, probably, and I think they really delivered on that. They were pretty um, blasé, I guess, is the way I would characterize it. They didn't really have much that made me um, be in awe, or none of their individual players. I was like, wow, I wish we had that guy on our team. You know what I mean? Like, there's guys on
Mm,
Feyenoord. You're like, whoa, that would be really cool if we had someone like
mm,
that. Um,
mm,
yeah, I just Lazio to me just looks like a really mediocre side, and so that's that doesn't diminish from. I agree with you, the performance that we put up, but I think they were set up in a way and play in a way and have a talent level and a profile that um, assisted us in having a better performance. Um, so yeah, let so generally then, what are your thoughts as far as, let's go over some of the positives then, because I think w- we understandably get a reputation of maybe being negative because we do try to counterbalance things. Um, but to your point, I think there was a lot of positives. So maybe talk about what you walked away from and giving you some encouragement, not only for
mm.
the rest of the Champions League, but maybe under the full duration of Brendan Rodgers' tenure, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as I've touched on, in the run of games that Celtic have had recently, away at Ibrox, Rotterdam, Livingston, Motherwell, it's been a tough run, um, and with depleted resources in relative terms. And actually, I would say that if you looked at all of those matches, the sort of man of the match has been the manager, really, in terms of managing through the various scenarios that have unfolded in those games. And in terms of what is the positive for me is, I think, just it's more a general point about how Rodgers is setting up to play in these matches. We've only got 2 matches of data. Obviously, it's a tiny sample, and also the distorting effect of playing with 9 players for nearly 30 minutes, wherever it was, in Rotterdam is enormous. But even having said all that, what seems to have happened, or seems to be happening, and we'll see how it plays out against Atletico Madrid, is that Rodgers has pretty much flipped round Celtic's kind of performances from a defending and an attacking perspective on what happened last season under Postecoglou. So if you recall, last season under Postecoglou, if you benchmark Celtic against the rest of the teams in the Champions League group stages, you know Celtic were doing pretty well in terms of attacking output. I think probably touching into the top 10 on things like total XG, quality of chances, number of shots, a whole range of metrics. And as we know, chances weren't taken and points were dropped. But the problem last season was that we were giving up nearly 2 XG every single game. We conceded 16 goals, and we were just as wide open as the ocean in terms of defensively. And we were ranking near the bottom, actually, defensively, benchmarked against all the other Champions League teams. Well, not all of them. Clearly, there was one that was just phenomenally bad, and, but pretty close to the bottom on most of the other metrics defensively. This season, well, I don't have any good news from an attacking perspective because we're ranking near the bottom now of all the attacking metrics. But again, context: 2 games, one played with 9 players. There's a penalty to factor in there as well, which distorts things in a 2 match sample. Again, sort of thing from defensive perspective, and from attacking perspective. So we're not creating a lot in terms of an attacking sense, but defensively, we've suddenly turned into, arguably one of the Champions League, which is remarkable. If you take away the penalty, so non-penalty XG, it's kind of under one. The number of shots that we're giving up has decreased. The thing that's decreased the most is the quality of the shots being taken by the opposition. Last season it was like 0.13 for every shot. It's almost halved in terms of that. We've massively reduced the number of chances we're giving away in transition and through counter pressing. And I think so. What does that all mean? It's really, I think what Rodgers has tweaked is he's actually just basically made us more solid, but also and probably these aren't massive changes. We're not suddenly gone to a back six. We've not suddenly collapsed back to the edge of our own box. These are subtle changes that have had big impacts. So we're actually not playing any deeper than we were, which I surprised me because I thought with Scales and Phillips especially, two quite not quick defenders, we would be a little bit deeper. But actually the midfield are playing slightly more forward, but it's actually the forward line that isn't as high as it was. We're not committing players like Jota and Abada last season, Maeda, Kyogo. They tended to stay very very high, um, and this season they're not. We're actually falling back into a 4-4-2 or a 4-5-1 as quickly as we lose the ball. That sort of recovery speed, the recovery efforts of the players to get back into shape has been tremendous and a real noticeable feature of the first two games. And basically means that we're not easy to play through and we're not getting caught on that. Even though, yesterday I think Liam Scales gave the ball away on the edge of his own box about 3 or 4 times. It didn't amount to anything because the midfield got back quickly. Yang was actually pretty good at recovering and getting back into shape. I'll say that for him. So, so we're a little bit more compact. We're not committing as many men forward, and but we're not playing any deeper. He's maintained a good high line, and just that effort to focus on recovery has meant we're just not getting caught out in transition as much, which is a lot of the trouble. If you think back to the Leipzig games and Madrid games, getting caught on the break time and time and time again. And when you get caught on the break, two things. One is you're attacking against a disorganized defense, which means which means there tends to be more spaces available, and therefore the other factor of that is that you're forcing defenders to make decisions about which runner do they pick up? Do they go to the ball? Do they jockey? Do they commit to the challenge? All of those things, you force them into making decisions. So if you can reduce those things, then you're really relying on the opposition to pick their way through, banks of four, etc., which is, against any set of athletes who are reasonably well organized, is a really tricky thing to do. So that's why, really, from a performance perspective, that all makes sense to me because, you know, I think Postecoglou's ideal was, well, we'll just go out and we'll make them defend and we'll make them uncomfortable, and if we score some goals, then we've played great football. Everyone wants to see it, and we'll win being true to ourselves, and that's all great. But as we've seen time and time again in the Champions League at that level, the more open the game, the more XG good teams are allowed to rack up, the quicker they're going to get to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've seen it. You've seen it in the Champions League group stages. Some of the scores that get racked up. That's what happens to you. That's what happened in the Bernabeu. It could have happened in Leipzig, etc. So the closer and tighter you keep the game, it's a low scoring sport. The more chance you've got of nicking a goal, and the less goals in the game, the more the underdog's got a chance. It's just common sense. It's a far more sensible way to play for Celtic in that competition. And so the other aspect, as well as that, the compactness, the recovery runs being very good. The third element is just simply controlling the ball. And this is the thing that was impressive about last night. Lazio may be 16th in Serie A, but they're still third for possession and ball control. They are at the end of the day a Maurizio Sarri team. Sarri controls the ball. Yes, he wants his team to be aggressive and vertical where possible, but ultimately he wants his team to control the ball. And Celtic went toe to toe, and in fact, had better control of the game. If you look across the 90 minutes, Celtic had better control of the ball over that whole game. Again, in some ways it's a defensive move. If you've got the ball, the opposition can't score. So we're not being as direct. We're not being as many sort of, you know, Hail Marys through the middle as perhaps we were under Postecoglou. We're keeping the ball, therefore we're not conceding territory because of that. We're not conceding chances because of that. I thought we played out from the back reasonably well. I mentioned Scales. I mean, it's just got to price that in. It's, that's where we are in terms of personnel at the moment. But in general, I thought we played pretty well out from the back. So positives for me are we're playing the style of football that a team like Celtic needs to play to have a fighting chance of getting a point, nicking a 1-0 in this type of competition. And to lose the way we did was gutting. Everybody will focus on that. It was completely undeserved as regards the flow of the game. And if we keep playing like that, we will nick games, we will nick goals, we will nick results over time because we've got a good level of control and we've got a good, solid defensive foundation.
I largely agree. I mean, to me, that is the overwhelming positive is um, the potential that we have a formula that makes sense relative to competing in Europe at this level. And having that proof of concept kind of proved out with this personnel, I think, is really positive. Um, if there was a kind of strategic commitment to having, this level of manager and this style of play, and that became like, this is what we're going to do. This is Celtic, and for the next 5, 10 seasons, this is how we're going about this. And even when and if Rogers leaves, like, this is how we're doing it. Because part of the challenge of making progress is identifying where the deficiencies are, where are the problems, and then addressing them. And I think that's the good news is I think it's pretty clear now what the problems are. And they're not on the touchline. And the formula of setting up and how we're going to go about doing this, seems to be pretty clear, pretty smart, and effective. Now it's just getting better players. I mean, it really is. I mean, and that's not to make light of how hard that can be. But we've talked about this endlessly, and I've mentioned this in the past that Rogers got I argued for a long time now, a very unfair characterization of his first tenure in Europe, because of some of the lopsided score lines that were on, chance concession that was well below what our side last season did. And you just, you run into these hornets nests of Neymar and Messi and Cavani and Mbappe type players that, they score on 4 of 4 chances in a game. Whereas, and that's yesterday. I mean, if you break down these games and when you get to these nip and tuck type uh, uh, matches against teams of, and again, I'm not that impressed with Lazio, but they're still of a level. They had 2 decent chances in the game and scored on both of them. And when I say chance, I mean actual shots, something that got to a shot. They squandered some other ones, like some of those other, like what one of the turnover central that they've sprayed wide. It was almost not exactly because positionally we were a little different, but was very analogous to the one that they scored on late at the end. Sprayed it wide. I think it was Anderson, and he just completely flubbed it. I mean, just didn't even get a shot off, and screwed up. So again, that's the difference. Where if we're playing Feyenoord or probably in the coming games against Atletico, that they're not going to be that bad on those kind of transitions. But that and really we had, I would argue, 2 good chances. If you just look at XG, one was the one that Kyogo scored on, um, which probably wasn't a great finish. Went right between the keeper's legs. So yeah, and the data reflect that, meaning that their keeper got dinged for that one. And what would have been just a genius finish with Kyogo's kind of flailing outside of his right foot, I think it was, even with
Yeah, yeah.
that great pass from McGregor that, it would have been tough. I mean, their keeper would move to where he needed to be, and I mean, it would have had to have been a world class finish to get it past him from those circumstances. But that was pretty much it for both teams. I mean,
Mm,
there just wasn't a
mm.
whole lot in it, and this is where we come back to the discussions that we had when Rodgers was rumored and then announced as the manager. It was like, okay, well, let's get the keeper position nailed down, because these fine margins, you need the keeper to make those kind of saves on those relatively small number of situations, and that hasn't happened. And we don't have that kind of um, creative impulse to maybe go from two of those chances a game to four, or just on those fine margins of tipping it a little bit. Um, so yeah, I think they're you know identifying where the actual issues are. I think is a huge positive. Doesn't mean they're going to get addressed, but hopefully there's enough body of work now in existence that as we go forward to January and next summer, that um, there's enough focus put on how do we go about it, actually addressing some of these issues. So um, on the personnel, on the recruitment side. So let's get into some of the not so positive aspects then, because there were certainly some of those as well. So what if you lined up on the pros and cons in the T chart, what would fall in your cons column?
Well, again, you defend well as a team. You have a good shape. You work hard to shuttle back when you lose the ball, and you do all that consistently. You control the ball, and yet you still concede two goals. And this may be a bit harsh, but I'm calling that Hart should save that header from the corner. Again, a younger, more agile goalkeeper gets there quicker and keeps that ball out. It barely crossed the line. Um, and if we again, let's look at it. Two games, right? The goal in 46 minutes in Rotterdam. That's down to Hart. That's a younger goalkeeper gets across, two hands on it. It's from 35 yards out. He saves that, and then the equaliser. Celtic go in at half time, one up. That forces their hand. They have to probably make changes, etc. Changes the game dynamic completely. So you know, we've listen. Sick of talking about this again. Yeah, and again, people need to realise that there's a huge difference between what is acceptable and workable with, and you can price in Scotland versus this level. And when we talk about, so I think we're both on the same page. When we talk about what does Celtic need, where do they need to improve, we're talking about it, looking at the benchmark of what do we need to do in Europe. Forget about the Scottish Premier League and the goalkeeping position. Joe Hart, many attributes even now still, but that's two games that Celtic have had control of, and then lost control because of two shots that I think both of them should be saved. That's the difference at Champions League level. You can't absorb that at that level. You can absorb it in Scotland. You can't absorb it at this level. Um, so I got that's why I posited at the beginning. Last in the last show on Tuesday and in Twitter. People think Bain should play, and again, some people scoff at that because they think Joe Hart, England goalkeeper, ex dozens of caps, Man City, Champions, League Premier League winner, blah 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 blah. But I'm talking about the here and now. We're talking about a 36-year-old goalkeeper versus one who's 30. And I know it's Scott Bain, and I know he threw one into the net against Hibs, and I know he made a howler in when he came on as a sub against Livingston and dropped the ball in front of the goal. But in terms of agility, in terms of speed across the box, speed in the area, again, I'll accept that risk of that versus just getting across the goal quicker, just being more agile, just being faster on his feet. I don't really care whether it was Seacrest or Bain, frankly. I just don't think we can carry the risk of a declining goalkeeper like Hart in at Champions League level. And I'm not being a smart arse, but I think two goals in two games that we're controlling is evidence of that. So that's the biggest, you know, negative for me. And then the other
Well,
is just, just to
can
continue.
I can
Sorry,
can I mention something
yeah,
just real
go.
quick? I'll throw in 2 cents
Yeah,
on the heart topic because I think even on the last goal, um, the nature of his immobility, I'm not saying it should have been saved. It would have been a difficult save.
it was a
But the
superb header, absolutely
it,
superb
it
header.
was, it was, but the so that we're talking about margins here, right? So had it been
Mhm.
slightly less of a brilliant header, um, the fact that he has to scramble to get across, which again, that he made the right play. Like he did the best he could in that circumstance. It was a good cross, but the fact that he is who he is at this stage and takes the time that he does to get across to cover that shot, he's not in the same positional stability in movement to be able to lunge back the other direction. So it went from something that maybe, a better, more mobile keeper lunges and doesn't quite get to because it was a great shot. And if it had been a slightly less great shot, he gets saved versus him just standing there like a potted plant and not even moving because he had to rush so much to get over to try and cover the back post. So I think that, again, I'm not blaming him for that goal. It's more so I think it also does highlight this issue relative to fine margins that, even if Pedro doesn't have a great header, he probably scored. He just had to kind of get that on goal and not have it directly at where Hart ended up. And it's probably going in
Yeah,
based off of
yeah,
how frantic Hart was trying to get back. So just wanted to
yeah.
throw that in.
I mean,
Uh,
no, that's fair, and it's such a dainty header actually that even a fingernail on it might have kept it out because it was such a
right.
soft, beautifully cushioned header. It was perfect really, but it wouldn't have needed a lot to keep it out either. So,
No.
there's that, and then, we've talked about it again, it's just we're so lacking in wide area penetration in terms of what that gives us. Now, I know, listen, Maeda opened up the game, he did what we don't see very often and often enough, which is he took the ball and he cut inside aggressively, played the ball into O'Reilly. O'Reilly fed in
Brilliant
Kyogo with
goal.
a
It
with
was a
an
brilliant
incredible
goal.
pass. It was a brilliant move. As you
Yep.
say, hypercritical. The goalkeeper, to me, I don't know what he's doing because Kyogo just hits it straight at him. So, but anyway, it's a brilliant move, and we deserve a bit of luck maybe that went through his legs. Um, but outside of that, where was the threat from wide? I mean, Yang had a couple of lovely touches, a couple of nice moments. He actually his tracking back, as I say, I thought was really good. But in terms of he would get the ball on occasions, he would shuffle, shimmy, and then just simply pass it out of play or pass it straight to their player. There was no quality there in that final third. That's a huge issue for us this season because at the moment with Hatate, is it poor form or is it just Hatate trying to play as a more advanced midfielder? If you take the two wingers and our nominal number 10, we're getting virtually nothing from them in terms of creativity and goal threat. And if we didn't have O'Reilly and Kyogo at the moment, where would we score? I don't know where it'd come from, in all honesty. So that to me is the other, it, in a game like last night, it almost didn't matter in the sense that, like you say, there was nothing in it. Neither team created much. If Celtic had won that game 1-0, I think that would have been a fair and just outcome, and we wouldn't have cared that we hadn't
100%.
created that many sort of chances. And that's the nature of Champions League football. You actually need people that are going to do all the mucky stuff, all the dirty stuff consistently well. Um, but you have to take your chance when it comes, type of thing. But it wasn't the case last night that we created loads of chances, didn't take them, and then cursed at the end. It was a game that should have been managed out really. But so yeah, they're the two main negatives, I suppose, for me in that sense.
Yeah, and this I a pet peeve of mine has become, and I'm probably over focusing on it because it's a pet peeve, is I just wish we'd recruit somebody that's fast. Like, can we sign you know what I mean? I mean, Yang's got a little bit of pace, but I mean, how do we keep signing wingers that are slow? I mean, I just
Mm,
don't. I mean, Palma is not going to cut it at that level with pace. I mean, it's just he
mm,
gets space, and then I mean, the opposition just close him down immediately because he can't progress fast enough. So he's
mm,
left at that level. You're going to be, and he's a skilled player. Like he seems like I think he's kind of a Jota light kind of player. You know what I mean? Like he's got some of the elements of on the ball skill. I mean, I don't think he's anywhere near as good as Jota in that sense, but where he does have the strengths are tilted in that direction. Um, just similarly, the Jota without the pace, and you put those two things together. I mean, he's going to have to be in like he was with the goal. I mean, the ball kind of flopped to him, and he did a great job finishing it because he's a skilled footballer on the ball. But is he going to be the person that's going to create space? Is he going to create things for teammates? And I'm at particularly at the European level or even above. I'm concerned about domestically against teams that have athletic fullbacks, even um, that he's going to be in that kind of Haksabanovic category, which is he might get the ball a lot and then just have to recycle it back because he can't beat anybody. Um, or create that space or get to the byline and whip across in. I mean, it's just so yeah, and Yang's kind of so deficient in in his whirling dervish style on the ball that yeah, his decision making and maybe his technical ability once he does beat somebody, it's just it's a bit of a mess to be honest with you. I mean, it really is. I mean, relative to Hatate up there and his risk reward issues, I agree with you. I mean, it's like I just don't know where the creativity is, and that's maybe it's Tilio coming. We can keep hoping that he's going to be the great
Right.
savior. um,
Yeah,
but
listen. We always fall back on the players that aren't here. I mean, Tilio's a young kid, come from the
yeah,
Australian league. We got to be realistic about
great.
what he's going
Yeah,
to
I'm not.
be. So, yeah. So we come back to what are the other alternatives? And actually, I think we've got three pretty good. Well, three players sitting on the bench who are central midfielders who are better than the wingers that we have. That's what I'm trying to say. So that says to me, we need to probably change the shape a little bit. I'm absolutely settled on that now. In the short, in the short term, until Abada's back, until Yang, Palmer, Tilio are settled, integrated, happy, confident, built up their fitness, maybe strengthened up a little bit, got a bit stronger, so they can mitigate any pace issues with at least being difficult to get off the ball, etc. All that's going to take time. Of course, it does. It's natural. The young players. So until that time, to me, mitigate it by trying to get you at least your strongest 11 players out.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially in Europe. Um, yeah, I think a top a striker tandem of Maeda and Kyogo would be interesting. And
Yeah.
I
That's
think what
enough
we've
pace. That's enough pace to stretch any defense, right?
well, that's what I was going to say. I think we've seen that already in the first two games that they haven't always come off, but there's been balls over the top and those balls in the channel that has really put opposition backlines under stress, and it creates stress for their keepers too. Do they come to the ball? Do they not come from the ball? Um, yeah. So I think it does make a lot of sense relative to the formula that we're looks like we've settled on as far as more of a I don't know, you tell me, more like a middle block rather than a high block, with that compression of the back, the top, the front line. Because that's I mean, again, if you have
It's
Maeda.
honestly, it's small. Sorry, James. It isn't. See, it's not revolutionist. It's small tweaks that Rogers has done that have
Yep,
had a big impact, and it's more about priority. It's priority, right? So previously last season, it might have been okay. You lose the ball in the final third. I want you to press. Now it might be the priority is I want you to fall back into shape.
yep.
Probably not so much high up the pitch. I don't mean that, but certainly anywhere in the middle of the field. You lose the ball. I want you in shape now, and I want us to be compact, and I want us to be solid. And it's a small thing, and it's hard work actually but it makes a big difference.
Well, and if you, I mean, I just again, I know it's in the data too, but if you just observationally, I mean, last season we had a lot of Maeda chasing people down and trying that forward press, going at the keeper, going at center backs, full backs that are deep, and we're doing that to a degree, but again, it's a level of intensity. And a lot of times under Postecoglou, I felt like a lot of that was wasteful, meaning that it wasn't actually doing much other than kind of harassing teams that could just pass around us pretty easily. And
Yeah,
if you think about
agreed.
that, Maeda being maybe 15 yards off of the touch line or the end line, and then having to get back into shape and recovering. Whereas even if it's 10 or 15 yards less advanced that he is, getting back into shape, getting back to, as my hockey friends would say, back checking, to that forward line coming back and defending, um, and kind of, he's so brilliant at that. So the more you utilize him as that weapon in that regard, given our priorities and the formula that we're looking for, I think it's excellent. I mean, I think he's offering, um, significantly more defensive value doing that, the back checking, than he was, chasing down Real Madrid center backs as if they weren't going to just say, swat you away, get away from me, you fast fly, and kind of pass
Yeah.
around you. So, yeah, I actually like a lot, how, and I think it would be interesting to see, what you're discussing again, whether it's a 4-4-2 or 4-4-2 diamond, or 3-4-2-1, 3-4-1-2. There's a lot of different iterations that and again, I'm guessing that we will start to see more tinkering as we get more, players back from injury. That's my guess anyway, given Rogers'
Yeah.
historical proclivities.
You
But
can you can you can still have width. I mean, a 4-4-2 diamond is brilliant in terms of. And again, listen, talking about this as if it's a shape for night. It's not. It's like an attacking starting framework. We'll still play the same in defence as we've done, whether that's a 4-4-2 or it's a 4-5-1, whatever you want to call it. That won't change. It's really about connections and the 4-4-2 diamond still lets you have players giving width. It still lets you have a 10 behind a striker, etc. So you still have those things, but it's all about finding space. But in this case, it's about getting the better players on the pitch, really. Yeah,
well, and I'll give some formal advice to, I don't know him, but I'll call him Brendan in case he's watching or ends up watching this, which is, Brendan, don't call it a 4-2-2-2, or else you'll get the
no,
legacy wrath of John Barnes, history. So even if it's going to end up being a box midfield, just call it the diamond, so that we don't have to deal with all of
yeah,
the baggage from the history. Because I actually, I, more of the box spot version of the midfield wouldn't, and it would be fluid, obviously, but, um, yeah, I see a lot of, reason to think that that could be an interesting path to pursue, as we into the double tango with, Atletico now. Um, well, let's talk about some of the individual performances. Then, I mean, we kind of touched upon some of them. As far as positive standouts, who would you put in your m- more positive than negative as far as their total package?
yeah. I think in midfield, again, McGregor obviously wasn't going to get man marked, so he was free to sort of do McGregor type things, which I think he recycled the ball, kept things moving, kept things ticking over pretty well. O'Reilly, obviously, he had a few moments where he was caught in possession, but again, it's just a variety of work that he does. The assist, obviously, the amount of defensive work he gets through. As I say, he was second again to or Maeda in terms of uh, pressures. So Maeda had 35, which is pretty mad. O'Reilly had 25, was the next highest. Kyogo 21 was the one after that. So, you're getting everything. I think with O'Reilly, as we've seen this season, he's been doing the job of three sort of specialist midfielders, really. So, um, and I think I know Scales. What can you say? I mean, it's pretty much the same every game. I think you got to admire the guy, right? Because he keeps going, he keeps plugging away, he keeps doing the best he can, and doing a good job most of the time. Um, the rest of the time, you get turnovers, you get rushing to the ball when he perhaps shouldn't, etc., like the goal against Motherwell and so forth. So, but I think overall, he did a decent job. Kyogo, again, he's got nobody around him that's helping him. This is the problem. If he's not getting a pass from O'Reilly, he's not getting a pass at the moment. It's as simple as that. So, he took his goal, but that's more of a systemic issue. Um, you know, I thought Phillips was okay. I don't understand unless Phillips was really struggling physically, which he may have been. I don't know. I don't know why we brought Carter Vickers on, and I'm probably being biased with hindsight here, obviously, as to what happened for the winning goal, where Carter Vickers coughed it up right in the middle of the goal with a transition of 5v3, and that absolute nightmare. But why was he even needed to be on the pitch, sort of thing? That may
Tough,
be, as I say,
tough,
recency
tough.
bias. Yeah,
It's a tough spot for someone to kind of be reintroducing themselves after effectively 6 months out. I mean, he had a
yeah, yeah.
a cup of tea uh, coming back before he hurt the hamstring. So yeah, interesting. Again, I'm not critical about it. It's just I find it interesting that that was, and
Yeah.
my
I thought
guess
it was a
is
strange
because
thing. Yeah,
I think my guess is because of Phillips having had the issues with his own injury issue and kind of building up.
probably.
That's
Yeah.
my guess. But one thing I did want to say real quick on Liam Scales is that this is a completely selfish. Um, yeah, I just say it's selfish. Is that I'm glad he didn't score the bicycle kick because had he scored the bicycle kick, we would have had to have ended this show. We'd had to stop because Endo would have
Yeah.
become so unbearable and more ridiculous than he already is that we just had to stop everything. So thank you, Liam Scales, for not ending the huddle
Yeah.
breakdown because it was within your power to do so. Um, yeah, I think Greg Taylor actually was pretty good. Like he overall, given he gave the ball away a couple of times, and again, just based off of his, we talk about endlessly, lost some one v one physical battles, but within that context, I actually thought he inverted very well. He was playing that kind of midfield role. Overall, I thought pretty well. So he stands out to me as kind of a more positive than negative. Um, I'd say probably I wouldn't say it's a red flag yet, but a growing anxiety I have might be on Alistair Johnston, um, and maybe his um, suitability with with the way he's being asked to play under Rodgers. Um, he's such a good defender in many ways, but he doesn't have that blistering pace. And on the ball, I'm still unconvinced. Like he shows flashes, and but at times I worry about kind of that technical proficiency and decision making. Um, so that's more of eating away at me kind of thing. I'm not concerned, so to speak, but to keep monitoring. Um, but yeah, I thought Scales. I mean, it's one of those things where until he goes too far in the things that he's doing well, like he's been walking that edge at times. Being so aggressive in the tackle and so physically on the front foot that it hasn't turned into a calamity yet. But I suspect it's a matter of when, not if, that he's
Well, yeah.
s-
The
just
number
that
the number of times he's
second
given
off.
the number of times he's given the ball away close to the edge of his own box, and he's got away with it nearly every time.
Yeah,
Lagerbielke wasn't so lucky and got a lot of flack. So a lot, again, it's outcome influencing perception rather than reality in
yeah.
terms of what actually happened. So yeah. So
Now
listen,
on the ball, but even
I
his
want,
defending, his defending so far has shaded towards really good actually.
Mhm.
On like man, one-on-one defending. Like positionally, there've been some issues, but I think I've seen there's slight margin of that if he's just a half a step not quite there, that
Yeah,
it
yeah,
could turn into a calamity. But as long as as long as he keeps doing what he's doing at this level with how he's been playing, I think it's about as good as we could have hoped for. I think. I mean, it's been going
yeah.
as well as we could have hoped, so that's a good thing.
Yeah,
And
if you look back at
great,
the games that he's had to stand up to, it's pretty impressive, really, overall. But
yeah,
listen, I wanted to ask you a question because I don't know the answer to this, and I'm hoping you do, right? This is the one thing tactically that I don't think it mattered in a material outcome sense, but it just scared the hell out of me when I saw that we were lining up Yang, Hitati, Taylor, scales on the same side of the pitch, and we moved Maeda over to the right. So we had our best forward presser, our most solid fullback, and our best midfield defender, O'Reilly, on one side, and we had the four players who were most likely to give the ball away, all on one side of the pitch. And I didn't understand that at all, but maybe you can help me there.
The only thing I can come up with is maybe they identify, and I don't know, like I haven't looked at Lazio this closely, but maybe I could see thinking that if their left center back and left fullback were identified as weak points that you'd want to press more, and or maybe they're sloppier on the ball, that kind of thing. I could see that logic more as like a proactive, try to force them into mistakes kind of logic. But yeah, generally, I mean, as far as your patented toxic combinations go, um,
That's a doozy.
yeah, that left side's not even a hat trick. That's the quadrenal potential toxic
Oh man.
combination, an unprecedented
Yeah.
four. So, um, that's if I'm trying to think about what maybe could the logic could be. Um, yeah, I don't know because it was. I mean, it was.
Well, I mean, that
Um,
was the thing. I looked at where the Lazio control the game, and if anything, it's on the right-hand side of their attack. They have more control with Felipe Anderson on the right normally. I mean, Sakagni on the left looks a really good young player. He was fast, aggressive, but he didn't really get involved in the game a lot. And he was wanting to
mhm.
cut inside it all the time. And, they really didn't look like, when I looked at the data, they didn't look like they had a lot of control on the left-hand side, which is why I didn't know why we were packing that. Maybe it was the reverse. Maybe it was they thought that was, like you say, that was the weak side, and we could overload. But I didn't detect we were particularly attacking, down that side. Albeit the goal did come down that right side. To be fair.
Well, and this goes back to perception versus reality, and how our perception might be different. So who knows what reality actually is? But if you kind of just take reputation of McGregor, Taylor, and Hitate as kind of your foundational build up, and keeping possession, and um, creating, and then having Yang as the outlet to take somebody on 1v1 with that side. Like, I disagree with it, but I could see that maybe being a theory, as opposed to Maeda on that side, where he just, he really, despite creating the goal, basically, there was a lot of instances of similar opportunities that he did not manifest in such great outcome. So I could see that as a theory. Like I said, even though it's probably not one I would come up with, um, relative to having Maeda on that side, and and this really comes down to the question of Hatate as a fulcrum. Is he really the person that you want to be building that kind of strategy around? And I think we've generally made our point of view clear on that. But if that continues to be the thought or the thinking, then I could see that being why that mixture of players would be on that side. And in fairness, like it's I sense a uh, a shift in winds on Hatate, to a degree, where people are starting to get a little more critical, and even within the stadium, you kind of can hear some of the groans on the broadcast as far as when he wasn't, um, successful in some of his creative attempts. I actually don't think he was that bad yesterday. I mean, that as far as his game play goes, like, he didn't have any of his really bad turnovers or giveaways that were, directly responsible for a Lazio uh, chance. So yeah, he wasn't successful in anything really of substance going forward, but that's kind of normal for him. And like I said, the fact that he didn't really have any major giveaways, I thought was fine. So I thought he was fine yesterday. I mean, I wouldn't. pointed him out as a major problem yesterday as far as why the game turned out the way it did anyway.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
Okay, well, we're up around 50 minutes. Any other thoughts or summary on the game, and then if not, maybe we'll quick look ahead to our friend. Is it Derek McInnes we see again this weekend? As our old friend?
Oh yes, he's only won 2 games this season. I think. Well, I mean, I think he won some games in the group stages of the League Cup, but I mean, and
Right,
so
league.
against Premier League teams, they won the opening game of the season, obviously, and then they beat us in the cup, and they've either drawn or lost every other game against the Premier League side.
Yep.
It's interesting. I don't know whether that bubbles burst a little bit. Um, yeah, I mean, listen, home on grass. We should be doing the business, but again, there's a lot of risk there because of again, it's almost remarkable that Celtic had that level of control in the match, um, given the, the problems that we've got, especially in attack at the moment. We talked about the defense all season, but it's actually the attack that's worrying me more now. That if Carter Vickers is back, we just should start to look even more solid there. And we are giving away way too much XG in even in league games. Let's be honest about it. But it's the attack really that. And listen, we had a good laugh about our friend Mickey, but it's almost the case that it doesn't matter. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. With a few exceptions maybe, but almost anyone that walks in the door to be manager down there is going to make them better, right?
Right.
And we've got to be ready for that challenge. So as I say, there's a lot of work to do. I still think, I
Well,
think Rodgers is doing his best with the tools he's been given.
and this is the paradox that we've entered into, which is the Ange Ball experience effectively collapsed chance creation domestically while being a complete free for all in Europe, and now we've entered the bizarro world, or the uh, uh, the exact opposite of that, where we're shutting opponents down, relatively speaking, in 2 games in Europe under Rodgers, and at the same time conceding chances domestically, which is, as I mentioned earlier in the week, like pretty much in line with some of the worst stretches of our play in the last 5-6 seasons.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it'll be interesting. We know what we'll get from Kilmarnock for the most part. If I look at where I'd be most worried, and again, I don't know if this is truly reflective of the player. I haven't looked into him longer term, but and I don't even know his name off the top of my head. I didn't even, as I often say, I don't do that much work on our domestic opposition outside of Rangers a lot of the time anymore. Just don't have the time for it. But their keeper has been doing well this season in the 7 games. So
Mm.
including shot stopping. So in theory, if he's actually a good shot stopping keeper, then that's always something I worry about. And one of these opposition keepers having a big game and stealing a draw or something. But yeah, and they have what's his face, Armstrong, down the wing. He's always a big pain in
Yes,
the butt.
he's incredibly productive for them. But, if you look at the rest of the SPFL teams, Armstrong's a real standout. And actually, I meant to mention, and I want to mention, um, the performance of Blair Spittle from Motherwell last week. It was actually one of the best performances by an opposition player against Celtic in the SPL that I can remember. And I didn't have time actually, but I would have done an article on it. But his stats were tremendous in that game. His packing stats were absolutely exceptional, and obviously he scored the goal. But he created the most chances. He had the best packing stats for them. He was excellent. I think he's 28 now, Spittle, and he's another player that doesn't really have any pace, but he's a clever player. But yeah, him and Armstrong, I would argue, are two of the cleverest, most creative players outside of the top two, certainly, that are worth keeping an eye on. They're interesting players.
Somebody from Motherwell just got called up to Canada. I don't know if it was him. Um,
There's a Theo Bair as the striker. He's
oh, somebody
Canadian.
else. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
yeah.
I don't know Spittle's background, so I didn't know if that was, but yeah, because he
He
was
came from
great.
he was at Partick Thistle for years, and then he went to Motherwell. but he looks
Well,
like
that
he could be he could be a star for Aberdeen or Hibs or something. He could easily be like one of their best players, I think.
well, and just as kind of these are things I have to mention, or else Enda's going to kill me. So Liam Scales did get a call up to the Republic of Ireland. So congratulations to
Brilliant.
Enda and to Liam.
Absolutely brilliant.
Um, and he asked me to read this quote on the show. This goes with, I think, the consensus of the support coming out of yesterday. It's not often that I quote. I have to say, quote. It's not often that Celtic surprised me, but even I was surprised at how Celtic managed to out Celtic themselves once again in Europe. So that was Enda's requested statement in his absence today. So I think we'll leave it there for today's show. Once again, as always, if you can support by subscribing on YouTube, uh, commenting below, we always welcome the comments and try to read through them. And if you can subscribe and or comment, excuse me, leave a review on iTunes and or Spotify, we appreciate that. Always appreciate you listening and viewing, and we will talk to you next week.